Number 5270 shall be 7 years of famine. This signifies a lack and seeming privation of truth, as is evident from the signification of a famine, namely a lack of knowledge, thus also a privation of truth. For that falsities expelled truths so that it appeared as if they no longer existed, is signified by the thin and evil kine did eat the 7 fat kine. And they ate them up, and it was not known that they had eaten them up. And also by the thin ears swallowed up the 7 good ears. The things here treated of, that in the beginning truth will be multiplied in both naturals, and that afterwards it will so fail as scarcely to appear, is a secret no one can know unless it is given him to understand the reformation and regeneration of man. As this is the subject treated of in the internal sense of the following verses, a few words shall be said about it in advance. During his reformation, a man first learns truths from the word or from doctrine, and stores them up in the memory. When one who cannot be reformed has learnt truths and stored them up in the memory, he believes that this is sufficient, but he is much mistaken. The truths he has acquired must be introduced to and conjoined with good, and this cannot be done so long as the evils of the love of self and the love of the world remain in the natural man. These loves were the first introducers, but the truths cannot possibly be conjoined with them, and therefore, in order that conjunction may be effected, the truths introduced and retained by these loves must first be expelled, though they are not really expelled, but are drawn within so as not to appear, for which reason it is called a seeming privation of truth. When this has been done, the natural is illumined from within, and the evils of the love of self and the love of the world give way, and in the degree in which they give way, truths are brought back and are conjoined with good. The state when man is seemingly deprived of the truths is called in the word desolation, and is also compared to evening, in which man is before he comes into the morning. And therefore, in the representative church, the day began from the evening. Number 5271, verses 28 to 32. This is the word that I spake unto Pharaoh. What God doeth, he hath caused Pharaoh to see. Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty in all the land of Egypt, and there shall arise after them 7 years of famine. And all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land. And plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that famine after it, for it shall be very grievous. And for that the dream was repeated unto Pharaoh twice. It is because the word is established by God, and God is hastening to do it. This is the word that I spake unto Pharaoh, signifies what the natural thought from the celestial of the spiritual. What God doeth signifies concerning what is provided. He hath caused Pharaoh to see signifies the apperception of the natural. Behold, there come 7 years signifies states of providence. Of great plenty in all the land of Egypt signifies the multiplication of truth in both naturals. And there shall arise after them 7 years of famine signifies the states that follow when there is a lack of truth. And all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt signifies the removal of truth and the apparent privation of it in both naturals. And the famine shall consume the land signifies even to despair. And plenty shall not be known in the land signifies that nothing shall be apperceived therein of truth previously there, by reason of that famine after it, for it shall be very grievous, signifies on account of such a lack. And for that the dream was repeated unto Pharaoh twice, signifies because foreseen concerning both naturals. It is because the Word is established by God, signifies that it is divine, and God is hastening to do it, signifies in every event. Number 5272. This is the word that I spake unto Pharaoh. This signifies what the natural thought from the celestial of the spiritual, as is evident from the signification of a word, namely, a thing, see below, from the signification of speaking, namely, thinking, from the representation of Joseph, who here speaks, namely, the celestial of the spiritual, and from the representation of Pharaoh, namely, the natural, see above. From all this it is plain that this is the word that I spake unto Pharaoh signifies that thing, or that which the natural thought from the celestial of the spiritual. As regards word, in the original language, a thing is expressed by word, and hence divine revelation is called the Word, and so also is the Lord in the supreme sense. And the Word, when predicated of the Lord, and also of revelation from him in the proximate sense, signifies divine truth, from which all things have their existence. That all things have come into existence and do come into existence through the divine truth, that is, from the Lord, and thus through the Word, is a secret that has not yet been disclosed. It is thought that this means that all things have been created by God speaking and commanding like a king in his kingdom. This, however, is not meant by all things having been made and created through the Word, but it is the divine truth proceeding from the divine good, or from the Lord, from which all things have come and do come into existence. The divine truth proceeding from the divine good is the supreme reality and the supreme essential in the universe, and it is this that makes and creates. Scarcely anyone has any other idea of the divine truth than of a word that issues from the mouth of a speaker and is dispersed in the air. This idea of divine truth has given rise to the opinion that the word only means a command, thus that all things were made merely by a command, and thus not from any real thing that has proceeded from the divine of the Lord. But, as already said, the divine truth proceeding from the Lord is the supreme reality and essential. That is the source of all things, and from which are the forms of good and of truth. Regarding this mystery, however, of the Lord's divine mercy, more will be said in the following pages. Number 5273. What God doeth. This signifies concerning what is provided, as is evident from the signification of what God doeth, namely, what is provided. Number 5274. He hath caused Pharaoh to see. This signifies the apperception of the natural, as is evident from the signification of seeing, namely, understanding and perceiving, and from the representation of Pharaoh, namely, the natural, as already shown. Number 5275. Behold, there come 7 years. This signifies states of providence, as is evident from the signification of years, namely states, and from the signification of coming as being of providence. For coming and coming to pass, when said of the divine, or of that which God does, denote that which happens in accordance with providence, and consequently is of providence. That what God does is providence may be seen above. The 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine are treated of in the following verses, and thereby years are signified states. By the years of plenty, states of the multiplication of truth in the natural, and by the years of famine, states of the lack and privation of truth in the natural. In general, the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine in the land of Egypt describe in the internal sense the states of man's reformation and regeneration, and in the supreme sense the states of the glorification of the Lord's human. It was in order that these things might be represented that such events took place in the land of Egypt. And they took place there because the land of Egypt and Pharaoh mean in the internal sense the natural, the glorification of which in the Lord is here treated of. Be it known that the things which came to pass at that time and are described in the Word were representative of the Lord himself, of the glorifying of his human, and in the representative sense of his kingdom, consequently of the Church in general and of the Church in particular, and thus of the regeneration of man. For by regeneration a man is made a church in particular. What took place at that time was representative of such things, chiefly for the sake of the Word, that it might be written, and thus might contain what would represent divine, celestial, and spiritual things in a continuous series, and thus might be of service not only to the member of the Church, but also to the angels in heaven. For the angels perceive therefrom divine things, and are thereby affected with holy feelings that are communicated to the man who reads the Word with affection, for thus he also feels the holiness. This is the reason why such events took place in the land of Egypt. Number 5276. Of great plenty in all the land of Egypt. This signifies the multiplication of truth in both naturals, as is evident from the signification of plenty, namely, the multiplication of truth, see below, and from the signification of the land of Egypt, namely, both naturals. For Egypt signifies external knowledge, and as external knowledge is signified, so too is the natural. For what is in the natural is called external knowledge, and therefore the land of Egypt is the natural mind, in which is external knowledge. Hence all the land of Egypt signifies both the interior and exterior natural. That the natural is both interior and exterior may be seen above. Plenty signifies a multiplication of truth, because it is contrasted with famine, which signifies a lack of truth. The term for plenty in the original tongue is the opposite of famine, and in the internal sense signifies a full store and sufficiency of knowledges, because famine signifies a lack of them. Knowledges are nothing but the truths of the natural man, which, however, have not yet been made his own. The multiplication of such truths is here meant. Knowledges do not become truths in man until they are acknowledged by the understanding, which takes place when they are confirmed by him. And these truths do not become his own until he lives according to them. For nothing is made man's own except what enters into his life, for thus he himself is in the truths, because his life is in them. Number 5277. And there shall arise after them 7 years of famine. This signifies the states that follow when there is a lack of truth, as is evident from the signification of years, namely states, and from the signification of famine, namely a lack of knowledges, and from the signification of after them, namely following. Number 5278. And all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt. This signifies the removal of truth and the apparent privation of it in both naturals, as is evident from the signification of forgetting or being forgotten, namely removal, and hence apparent privation, and from the signification of plenty, namely the multiplication of truth, or truth multiplied, and from the signification of the land of Egypt, namely the natural mind or the natural man, here both naturals. Forgetting or being forgotten denotes removal and apparent privation, because the same is true of the memory and the thought. What a man thinks about is directly under his view, and things related thereto group themselves around in order, fading away into those unrelated which are very remote and thus forgotten. Things opposite are separated from the rest and hang down, and group themselves underneath, and balance those above. This arrangement is effected by the good that flows in, and such is the case with all man's thought. This is evident from thoughts in the other life, for in the light of heaven thoughts are sometimes presented to view, and then such a form of their arrangement is seen. From this it is evident that forgotten in the internal sense is nothing but removal and apparent privation. Number 5279. And the famine shall consume the land. This signifies even to despair, as is evident from the signification of famine, namely, a lack of knowledges, and hence a privation of truth, and from the signification of the land here of Egypt, namely, the natural mind. It signifies even to despair, because it is said that the famine shall consume the land. And when land signifies the natural mind, and famine the privation of truth, nothing but despair is signified. For then wasting takes place in a spiritual manner. In this passage is described a state of desolation caused by the privation of truth, the last stage of which is despair. Despair is the last stage of this state, because thereby the delight of the love of self and of the world is removed, and the delight of the love of good and of truth is introduced in its place. For in the case of those to be regenerated, the despair is about spiritual life, and consequently about the privation of truth and good, because when such persons are deprived of truth and good, they despair of spiritual life. Hence they feel delight and bliss when they come out of their despair. Number 5280. And plenty shall not be known in the land. This signifies that nothing shall be perceived therein of the truth previously there, as is evident from the signification of being known, namely, being perceived, from the signification of plenty, namely, truth multiplied, and from the signification of land, here the land of Egypt, namely, the natural mind. From this it is plain that by plenty not being known in the land is signified that nothing shall be perceived in the natural concerning the truth previously there. In this verse the subject is the last state of desolation, when there occurs the despair which next precedes regeneration. And as this is the subject treated of in the present verse, it must be explained. Every man must be reformed and be born anew or regenerated, that he may be able to enter heaven. For except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Man is born into sin, which has been increased in a long line from parents, grandparents, and ancestors, and made hereditary, and thus transmitted to the offspring. Every man who is born into all these inherited evils, thus increased in succession, and consequently is nothing but sin, and therefore unless he is regenerated, he remains wholly in sin. But in order that man may be regenerated, he must first be reformed, and this is done by means of the truths of faith, for he has to learn what good is from the Word and from doctrine therefrom. The knowledges of good from the Word or from doctrine therefrom are called the truths of faith, because all the truths of faith spring from good, and flow to good, for they look to good as their end. This is the first state, and is called the state of reformation. During their childhood and youth, most of those who are in the church are introduced into this state, and yet few are regenerated. For most of those in the church learn the truths of faith or the knowledges of good for the sake of reputation and honor, and also for gain. And when the truths of faith have been introduced by means of these loves, the man cannot be born anew or regenerated until these loves have been removed. In order, therefore, that they may be removed, the man is brought into a state of temptation, and this in the following manner. The loves referred to are excited by the infernal crew, for they desire to live in them, But the affections of truth and good that had been introduced from infancy in a state of innocence, and afterwards stored up interiorly and preserved for this use, are then excited by angels. The result is a conflict between the evil spirits and the angels, which is felt in the man as temptation. And because the conflict is about truths and goods, the truths previously introduced are, as it were, expelled by means of the falsities injected by the evil spirits, so that they no longer appear. And then, as the man suffers himself to be regenerated, the light of truth from good is introduced by the Lord through an internal way into the natural, into which light the truths are successively restored. This is the case with the man who is being regenerated, but few at this day are admitted to this state. In so far as they permit it, all do indeed begin to be reformed by means of instruction in the truths and goods of spiritual life. But as soon as they come to the age of early manhood, they suffer themselves to be carried away by the world, and thus go over to the side of infernal spirits, by whom they are gradually so estranged from heaven that they scarcely believe any longer that there is a heaven. Thus they cannot be brought into any spiritual temptation, for if they were, they would at once yield, and then their last state would be worse than the first. This explains what is here contained in the internal sense, namely the state of reformation and that of regeneration. But in this verse is described the last state of temptation, which is a state of despair. Number 5281. By reason of that famine after it, for it shall be very grievous. This signifies on account of such a lack, as is evident from the signification of famine, namely a lack of the knowledges of good, consequently a lack of truth. And finally despair on account of such a lack. And from the signification of very grievous, namely what is vast. The subject of the last state of desolation, which is one of despair, and of its increasing grievousness, is here continued. Number 5282. And for that the dream was repeated unto Pharaoh twice. This signifies because foreseen concerning both naturals, as is evident from the signification of a dream, namely what is foreseen, from the representation of Pharaoh, namely the natural, and from the signification of being repeated twice, as concerning both naturals, the interior and exterior. That the natural is twofold, interior and exterior, may be seen above. It was foreseen concerning the interior natural in the first dream, which was about the kine, and concerning the exterior natural in the second dream, which was about the ears of corn. Hence, being repeated twice denotes concerning both. Number 5283. It is because the Word is established by God. This signifies that it is divine, as may be seen without explanation. For Word, when predicated of God, is divine truth. And when this is said to be established by God, it signifies that the thing will surely come to pass. Number 5284. And God is hastening to do it. This signifies in every event, as is evident from the signification of doing when predicated of God, namely providence, whence also it is the event, for whatever is of the divine providence is certain to be the event. And from the signification of hastening to do it, as being in every event. In the internal sense, to hasten or haste does not mean quickly, but certainly, and also fully, thus in every event. For haste implies time, and in the spiritual world there is no time, but instead of time, state. Thus haste in time has reference in the spiritual world to a corresponding condition of state. And the condition of state that corresponds is that there are many things acting together towards the result, and thus ensuring a certain and full event. Number 5285, verses 33 to 36. And now let Pharaoh see a man intelligent and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint governors over the land, and take the fifth of the land of Egypt in the 7 years of plenty. And let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and heap up corn under the hand of Pharaoh for food in the cities, and let them guard it. And the food shall be for a store to the land against the 7 years of famine that shall be in the land of Egypt, and the land shall not be cut off in the famine. And now let Pharaoh see signifies the looking forward of the natural. A man intelligent and wise signifies about the inflowing truth and good. And set him over the land of Egypt signifies that will bring into order all things in the natural mind. Let Pharaoh do this signifies further looking forward. And let him appoint governors over the land signifies the orderly arrangement of general principles in the natural. And take up the fifth of the land of Egypt signifies that were to be preserved and afterwards stored up. In the 7 years of plenty signifies that had been introduced at the times when truths with goods were multiplied. And let them gather all the food signifies all things that are of use. Of those good years that come signifies that are to be gathered in at those times. And heap up corn signifies every good of truth at the same time. Under the hand of Pharaoh signifies for need and consequent disposal in the natural. For food in the cities signifies such things in the interior parts of the natural mind. And let them guard it signifies there to be laid up in store. And the food shall be for a store to the land signifies that it shall be there for every use of the natural. Against the 7 years of famine signifies according to the need in cases of deficiency. That shall be in the land of Egypt signifies that there shall be in the natural. And the land shall not be cut off in the famine signifies lest the man should perish. Number 5286. And now let Pharaoh see. This signifies the looking forward of the natural, as is evident from the signification of seeing or looking, namely, looking forward. For seeing here implies activity, that is, in doing. But when it does not imply that something is to be done, it signifies understanding and perceiving. With regard to the looking forward of the natural, the case is as follows. Man's natural, or his natural mind, which is beneath his rational mind, does not of itself look forward to anything, although it appears to do so as of itself. But its looking forward is from within, for the inner looks forward in the outer very much as a man looks at himself in a mirror in which the figure appears to be. This is also expressed in the internal sense by Joseph's speaking thus to Pharaoh. For Joseph represents the celestial of the spiritual, which is inner, and Pharaoh the natural, which is outer. And Joseph seemed to Pharaoh to be that very man intelligent and wise, who is here spoken of. Number 5287. A man intelligent and wise. This signifies about the inflowing truth and good, as is evident from the signification of an intelligent man, namely truth, and of a wise man, namely the good of truth. Be it known that in the internal sense a man intelligent and wise does not mean any such man, but in the abstract that which belongs to one who is intelligent and wise, thus truth and good. In the other life, especially in the heavens, all thought, and hence all speech, are carried on in an impersonal sense, and therefore thought and speech there are universal, and are relatively without limit. For so far as thought and speech are associated with persons and their specific qualities, and with names and also words, so far they become less universal, and are associated with the actual thing, and there abide. On the other hand, in so far as they are not associated with persons and what is connected with them, but with realities abstracted from them, so far they are dissociated from the actual thing, and are extended beyond themselves, and the mental view becomes higher and consequently more universal. This is very apparent from man's thought. Insofar as it regards the words of the speaker, it does not regard his meaning. And insofar as it regards the particulars of the memory and dwells on them, it does not perceive the nature of the things. And still more, insofar as it regards itself in everything, it narrows the thoughts and avoids viewing a subject in a universal manner. Hence it is that in proportion as anyone loves himself more than others, in the same proportion he is less wise. From this it is now plain why things in the abstract are signified in the internal sense by what, in the sense of the letter, is associated with persons. In the word, a distinction is occasionally made between wisdom, intelligence, and knowledge. And by wisdom is meant what is from good, by intelligence what is from truth, and by knowledge both of these in man's natural. As in Moses, I have filled Bezaleel with the Spirit of God, in wisdom and in intelligence and in knowledge and in all work. And again, take you men wise and understanding and knowing according to your tribes, that I may set them for heads over you. Number 5288. And set him over the land of Egypt. That this signifies that will bring into order all things in the natural mind, as is evident from the signification of setting over anything, namely, appointing one who will reduce to order, thus also reducing to order, and from the signification of the land of Egypt, namely, the natural mind. By him is here meant a man intelligent and wise, by whom is signified truth and good. From this it is plain that these words signify that truth and good will reduce to order all things in the natural. It is indeed good and truth that reduce to order each and all things in the natural mind, for they flow in from within, and thus arrange them. One who does not understand man's intellectual faculty and how he can mentally view things, perceive them, think analytically, draw conclusions from them, and at last refer them to the will, and thereby put them into act, sees nothing to wonder at in these things. He supposes that all things flow naturally in this way, being quite unaware that they are one, and all due to the influx through heaven from the Lord. And that without this influx a man could not think at all, and that when the influx ceases, so does all thought. Neither does he know that the good flowing in through heaven from the Lord reduces all things to order, and so far as the man allows, forms them in the image of heaven, and that thus his thought flows in accordance with the heavenly form. The heavenly form is that in which the heavenly communities are arranged, and they are arranged in accordance with the form induced by the good and truth that proceed from the Lord. Number 5289. Let Pharaoh do this. This signifies further looking forward, as is evident from what has been explained above. Number 5290. And let him appoint governors over the land. This signifies the orderly arrangement of general principles in the natural, as is evident from the signification of appointing over, namely, reducing to order; from the signification of governors, namely, general principles, see below; and from the signification of the land, here the land of Egypt, namely, the natural mind. The reason why governors signify general principles is that in and under them are grouped particulars. Princes or chiefs, however, signify primary things. Number 5291. And take the fifth of the land of Egypt. This signifies that are to be preserved and afterwards stored up, as is evident from the signification of taking a fifth, as here involving the same as tithing or taking a tenth. To tithe in the word signifies to make remains, and to make remains is to gather truths and goods, and then to store them up. That remains are goods and truths stored up by the Lord in the inner man may be seen above. And that remains are signified in the word by tithes, see Numbers, and likewise by 10, and also by 5, being the half of 10. Half and double in the word involve nearly the same thing as the numbers to which they are applied. 20 nearly the same as 10, 4 as 2, 6 as 3, 24 as 12, and so on. So also with numbers still further multiplied. For example, 100 and 1,000 involve nearly the same as 10, 72 and 144 as 12. What therefore compound numbers involve can be known from the simple numbers from which and with which they are multiplied. Also, what the more simple numbers involve can be known from the whole numbers, as what 5 is can be known from 10, and what 2½ is from 5, and so on. In general, it is to be known that numbers multiplied involve nearly the same thing as the simple numbers, but what is more complete, and that numbers divided involve the like, but what is not so complete. As regards 5 in particular, this number has a twofold signification, signifying a little and hence something, and also signifying remains. It signifies a little from its relation to those numbers which signify much, namely to 1,000 and 100, and hence also to 10. That 1,000 and 100 signify much may be seen above, and hence also 10. Hence it is that 5 signifies a little and also something. 5 signifies remains when it has reference to 10, 10 signifying remains, as already said. That all numbers in the word signify things may be seen above. He who does not know that the word has an internal sense not appearing in the letter will be greatly surprised that the numbers in the word signify things, chiefly because he cannot form any spiritual idea from numbers. Nevertheless, that numbers flow from the spiritual idea of the angels may be seen above. He may indeed know what the ideas or things are to which numbers correspond, but the source of this correspondence still lies hidden from him, such as the correspondence of 12 to all things of faith, and the correspondence of 7 to holy things, also the correspondence of 10 and of 5 to the goods and truths stored up by the Lord in the inner man, and so on. But it suffices to know that there is a correspondence, and that it is from this correspondence that all the numbers in the word signify something in the spiritual world. Consequently, that the inspired divine lies hidden within them. Take, for instance, the following passages in which 5 is mentioned. And first the Lord's parable about the man who went into another country, and delivered to his servants according to their abilities, to one 5 talents, to another 2, and to a third 1. And he that had received the 5 talents traded with them, and gained other 5 talents. And likewise he that had received 2 gained other 2. But he that had received 1 hid his Lord's silver in the earth. One who does not think beyond the literal sense must suppose that the numbers 5, 2, and 1 were taken simply for composing the story of the parable, and that they involve nothing further, whereas there is a mystery in these numbers themselves. For by the servant who received 5 talents are signified those who have accepted goods and truths from the Lord, thus who have received remains. By him who received 2 are signified those who have joined charity to faith when well on in years. And by him who received 1, those who have received faith alone without charity. Of the last it is said that he hid his Lord's silver in the earth, for by the silver he had is signified in the internal sense the truth that is of faith. And faith without charity cannot bring gain or bear fruit. Such are the things contained in these numbers. So in other parables, as in the one about the man who, going into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom, gave to his servants 10 pounds, and told them to trade with them till he came. When he returned, the first said, Lord, thy pound hath gained 10 pounds. And he said unto him, Well done, thou good servant, because thou hast been faithful in a very little, be thou over 10 cities. And the second said, Lord, thy pound hath made 5 pounds. And he said unto him also, Be thou also over 5 cities. The third had laid up the pound in a napkin. But the Lord said, Take away from him the pound, and give it unto him that hath 10 pounds. Here in like manner 10 and 5 signify remains, 10 more, 5 fewer. He who laid up the pound in a napkin denotes those who procure for themselves the truths of faith, but do not conjoin them with the goods of charity, and so have no gain or fruit therefrom. It is the same where the Lord mentions these numbers in other places, as with him that was called to the supper and said, I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I go to prove them. With the rich man who said to Abraham, I have 5 brethren, let one be sent to tell them, lest they also come into this place of torment. With the 10 virgins, 5 of whom were wise, and 5 foolish. And likewise in these words of the Lord, Think ye that I am come to give peace upon earth? I tell you, nay, but division. For from henceforth there shall be 5 in one house divided, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. And also even in the historic narrative that the Lord fed 5,000 men with 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and that he commanded them to sit down by hundreds and by 50s, and that after they had eaten they took up 12 baskets of fragments. As these passages are historic, it can hardly be believed that the numbers in them are significant, as the number 5,000 of the men, and also the number 5 of the loaves and 2 of the fishes, as also the number 100 and the number 50 of the companies that sat down, and lastly 12, which was the number of the baskets containing the fragments. Yet there is a mystery in each number. For every detail happened of providence, in order that divine things might be represented. In the following passages also, 5 signifies in both the true and the opposite sense such things in the spiritual world as it corresponds to. In Isaiah, There shall be left therein gleanings as in the shaking of an olive tree, 2 or 3 berries in the topmost bough, 4 or 5 in the branches of a fruitful tree. In the same, In that day there shall be 5 cities in the land of Egypt that speak with the lips of Canaan, and swear to Jehovah Zebaoth. Again, 1,000 shall flee before the rebuke of 1, before the rebuke of 5 shall ye flee, till ye be left as a pole upon the head of a mountain, and as an ensign on a hill. In the Revelation, the fifth angel sounded. Then I saw a star from heaven fallen upon the earth, and there was given to him the key of the pit of the abyss. To the locusts that came out thence it was said that they should not kill the men who had not the seal of God on their foreheads, but that they should be tormented 5 months. In the same. Here is intelligence, if anyone has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains, where the woman sitteth upon them. And they are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must remain a little while. In like manner the number 5 was representative in the following instances: that the valuation of a man and of a woman should be according to years, from a month to 5 years, and from 5 years to 20. Again, if a field were redeemed, a 5th part should be added, and if tithes were redeemed, a 5th part should be added. That the superfluous firstborn were to be redeemed for 5 shekels. That the firstborn of an unclean beast was to be redeemed by adding a 5th part. That as a fine, for certain transgressions a 5th part was to be added. And that if a man shall steal an ox or a sheep, and kill it or sell it, he shall pay 5 oxen for an ox, and 4 sheep for a sheep. That the number 5 holds within it a heavenly mystery, and that 10 does the same, is evident from the cherubim of which we read in the 1st book of Kings. Solomon made in the holiest place 2 cherubim of olive wood, each 10 cubits high. 5 cubits was the wing of the one cherub, and 5 cubits the wing of the other cherub. It was 10 cubits from the tips of its wings even unto the tips of its wings. So the cherub was 10 cubits. Both the cherubim were of one measure and one form. The same is evident also from the lavers around the temple and from the lampstands, of which it is written in the same book. The bases of the lavers were placed, 5 by the side of the house to the right, and 5 by the side of the house to the left. Also that the lampstands were placed, 5 on the right and 5 on the left, before the holiest place. The brazen sea was 10 ells from brim to brim, and 5 ells in height, and 30 ells in circumference, in order that holy things might be signified by the numbers 10 and 5, and also by 30. Which number of the circumference does not indeed geometrically answer to the diameter, but still it spiritually involves what is signified by the perimeter of that vessel. That in the spiritual world all numbers signify things is plainly manifest from the numbers in Ezekiel, where is described the new earth, the new city, and the new temple, which the angel measured in detail. The description of nearly all the holy things there is set forth by numbers, and therefore one who does not know what those numbers involve can know scarcely anything about the mysteries contained therein. The number 10 and the number 5 occur there, besides the multiples 25, 50, 500, and 5,000. It is manifest from the details in these chapters that the new earth, the new city, and the new temple signify the Lord's kingdom in the heavens, and hence his church on earth. These instances of the use of the number 5 have been quoted, because in this and the following verses it is said of the land of Egypt that a 5th part of the produce was to be collected there in the 7 years of plenty, and to be preserved for use in the following years of famine. Therefore it has been shown that a 5th part signifies goods and truths stored up in man by the Lord, and reserved for use when there shall be a famine, that is, when there shall be a lack and privation of good and truth. For unless such things were stored up in man by the Lord, there would be nothing to uplift him in a state of temptation and vastation, consequently nothing through which he could be regenerated. And thus he would be without the means of salvation. Number 5292. In the 7 years of plenty. This signifies that had been introduced at the times when truths with goods were multiplied, as is evident from the signification of years, namely states, and hence also times, see below, and from the signification of plenty, namely the multiplication of truth, or truth multiplied. Here therefore are signified truths with goods multiplied, because truths are nothing without goods, and no truths are stored up in the inner man except such as are conjoined with goods. Years signify not only states but also times, because in the internal sense years signify entire states, that is, entire periods from the beginning of a state to the end. These periods cannot be expressed otherwise than by times, nor can they be understood as anything else by those who are in time. That years and days are both states and times may be seen above. Number 5293. And let them gather all the food. This signifies all things that are of use, as is evident from the signification of gathering, namely bringing together and preserving, and from the signification of food, namely things that are of use. In the internal sense, food properly signifies the things that nourish the soul of man, that is, that nourish him after death, for he then lives as a soul or spirit, and no longer needs material food, but spiritual food, which consists in everything that is of use, and everything that is conducive to use. That which is conducive to use is to know what is good and true. That which is of use is to will and do what is good and true. These are the things that nourish the angels, and are therefore called spiritual and heavenly food. Man's mind, within which are his interior understanding and interior will, or his intentions or ends, is not nourished by any other food, even while he lives in the body. Material food does not penetrate to the mind, but only to the things of the body, which that food sustains to the end that the mind may enjoy its food, while the body enjoys its food. That is, that there may be a sound mind in a sound body. Food in the spiritual sense denotes everything that is of use, because all man's knowledge and all his understanding and wisdom, and therefore all his will, ought to have use for their end. Hence the character of his life is according to the character of his use. That food in the internal sense denotes everything that is of use is plain from these words of the Lord. Jesus said to the disciples, I have food to eat that ye know not of. Therefore said the disciples one to another, Hath any man brought him aught to eat? Jesus saith unto them, My food is to do the will of him that sent me, and to perfect his work. And in another place, Labor not for the food that perisheth, but for that food that endureth into eternal life, which the Son of Man shall give unto you. For him hath God the Father sealed. Number 5294. Of those good years that come. This signifies that are to be gathered in at those times, as is evident from the signification of years, namely states, and also times. The good years that come are therefore those times when truths with goods are multiplied, which are signified by the 7 years of plenty. Number 5295. And let them heap up corn. This signifies every good of truth at the same time, as is evident from the signification of heaping up, namely gathering, and at the same time preserving. and from the signification of corn, namely the good of the natural. Here the good of truth in the natural. The good of truth is truth in the will and in act. Corn signifies good, because a field in the spiritual sense is the church. And hence whatever belongs to a field, such as seed, sowing, harvest, crop, corn, and also the head or ear of corn, and in particular wheat, barley, and other kinds of grain, denote the things of the church, and all the things of the church bear relation to good and truth. Number 5296. Under the hand of Pharaoh. This signifies for need and consequent disposal in the natural, as is evident from the signification of the hand, namely power. Hence, under the hand denotes for disposal in every case of need, for what is in the power of any one is at his disposal, and from the representation of Pharaoh, namely the natural. Number 5297. For food in the cities. This signifies such things in the interiors of the natural mind, as is evident from the signification of food, namely all things that are of use, thus truths and goods, and from the signification of cities, namely the interiors of the natural mind. In the universal sense, cities signify the doctrinal things of the church, but in a particular sense they signify the interiors of man where doctrinals are, or rather where are truths conjoined with good. That the truths and goods in man form as it were a city may be seen above, and hence that man himself in whom is the church is called the city of God. The signification of a city is like that of a house. In the universal sense, a house signifies good, but in the particular sense, it signifies a man, and specifically his mind as to the good and truth conjoined in it. And a house with its apartments, outbuildings, and courts is a city in miniature. The interiors of the natural mind are signified by cities in Isaiah. In that day there shall be 5 cities in the land of Egypt that speak with the lips of Canaan, and that swear to Jehovah Zebaoth. And the goods and truths in the interiors are signified by the cities in the Lord's parable in Luke. He said to him that by the pound had made 10 pounds, Well done, thou good servant, because thou hast been faithful in a very little, be thou over 10 cities. And he said to the second, who had made 5 pounds, Be thou also over 5 cities. Here therefore, by heaping up food in the cities and guarding it, is signified that truths conjoined with good were to be stored up in the interiors of the natural mind, and when these truths and goods have been stored up there, they are called remains, in which the various spiritual life of man consists, and from which he is spiritually nourished in every case of need and want, that is, in every spiritual famine. Number 5298. And let them guard it. This signifies there to be laid up in store, as is evident from the signification of guarding, namely storing, that is, in the interiors of the natural mind, which are signified by cities. Number 5299. And the food shall be for a store to the land. This signifies that it should be there for every use of the natural, as is evident from the signification of food, namely goods and truths, and from the signification of for a store, namely what is laid up for every use, because for use in the following years of famine, and from the signification of the land, here the land of Egypt, namely the natural mind. Number 5300. Against the 7 years of famine. This signifies according to the need in cases of deficiency, as is evident from the signification of famine, namely a lack of truth. That it is for a case of need, then, is plain, For years, in the internal sense, are states, as often shown, and therefore against those years denotes those states in which there is need. Number 5301. That shall be in the land of Egypt. This signifies that shall be in the natural, as is evident from the signification of the land of Egypt, namely the natural mind. When here and elsewhere the natural is mentioned, it means the natural mind. For man has two minds, a rational mind and a natural mind. The rational mind is of the internal man, and the natural mind is of the external man. This mind or this man is what is meant by the natural, simply so called. That the mind is the man himself will be seen in what now follows. Number 5302. And the land shall not be cut off in the famine. This signifies lest the man should perish, that is, by the lack of truth, as is evident from the signification of being cut off, namely perishing, and from the signification of land, here the land of Egypt, namely the natural mind. And because it is the natural mind, it is the man himself, for man is man by virtue of his mind. For the mind itself constitutes the man, and such as the mind is, such is the man. By the mind is meant man's intellect and will, and consequently his veriest life. Stupid people suppose that man is man by virtue of his outward form, in that he has a human face. Those less stupid say man is man because he can speak, and those still less stupid that man is man because he can think. But man is not man by virtue of these things, but from the fact that he can think what is true and will what is good, and that when he thinks truth and wills good, he can look up to the divine and perceptibly receive it. It is in this that man is distinguished from the brute animals. But his looking like a man, and his ability to speak and to think, do not make him a man. For if he thinks what is false and wills what is evil, this makes him not merely like a brute, but worse. For by these very faculties he destroys what is human in himself, and makes himself a wild beast. This is especially evident from such persons in the other life, who, when seen in the light of heaven and looked at by angels, appear as monsters, and some of them as wild beasts, the deceitful as serpents, and others in other forms. But when they are removed from that light and are brought back into their own light, which they have in hell, they look to one another like men. But how man would perish when the truth fails him, had he not goods and truths stored up by the Lord in the interior mind, signified by the food for a store to the land against the 7 years of famine, that the land shall not be cut off in the famine, will be told in the following verses of this chapter. Number 5303, verses 37 to 40. And the word was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, Shall we find such a one as this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God? And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, Forasmuch as God hath caused thee to know all this, there is no one so intelligent and wise as thou. Thou shalt be over my house, and thy mouth shall all my people kiss. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. And the word was very good in the eyes of Pharaoh, signifies what is very pleasing to the natural, and in the eyes of all his servants, signifies what is very pleasing to all things in the natural. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, signifies the perception of the natural together with all things therein. Shall we find such a one as this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God? Signifies about the influx of truth, in which is good from the interior, thus the celestial of the spiritual. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph signifies the perception of the natural from the celestial of the spiritual. Forasmuch as God hath caused thee to know all this, signifies because it has foresight and providence. There is no one so intelligent and wise as thou, signifies that this is the only source of truth and good. Thou shalt be over my house, signifies that the natural mind shall be subordinate and submissive thereto. And thy mouth shall all my people kiss, signifies that everything therein shall be in obedience to him. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou, signifies that nevertheless this will appear to come from the natural, because from the celestial of the spiritual through the natural. Number 5304. And the word was very good in the eyes of Pharaoh. This signifies what is very pleasing to the natural, as is evident from the signification of the word being good, namely pleasing. In the eyes is a customary form of speech, because the eye signifies the interior sight, thus understanding, perception, attention, and other things belonging to this sight. And therefore by the word being good in his eyes is signified what is very pleasing, and from the representation of Pharaoh, namely the natural, as often shown before. Number 5305. And in the eyes of all his servants. This signifies what is very pleasing to all things in the natural, as is evident from the signification of the word being good in their eyes, namely what is very pleasing, and from the signification of servants, namely the things in the natural, especially in the exterior natural. A servant is frequently mentioned in the word, and thereby in the internal sense is meant that which is of service to something else, and in general whatever is below relatively to what is above. For it is in accordance with order that the lower should be of service to the higher, and in so far as it is of service, it is called a servant. In the present case, it is the things in the natural that are called servants. For the natural in general is represented by Pharaoh, and the general itself is that to which the particulars are to be of service, as for the common good in kingdoms. That Pharaoh is the natural in general may be seen above. Number 5306. And Pharaoh said unto his servants. This signifies the perception of the natural together with all things therein, as is evident from the signification of saying in the historical parts of the word, namely perceiving, and from the representation of Pharaoh, namely the natural, and from the signification of his servants, namely all things in the natural. Number 5307. Shall we find such a one as this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God? This signifies about the influx of truth, in which is good from within, thus about the celestial of the spiritual, as is evident from the signification of a man, namely truth, and from the signification of the Spirit of God, namely good from within, thus from the divine. For the Spirit of God denotes that which proceeds from the divine, thus from good itself, because the divine is good itself, and that which proceeds from it is truth, in which is good, which is signified in the word by the Spirit of God. For the Spirit itself does not go forth, but truth itself, in which is good, or holy truth, the Spirit being instrumental in bringing it forth. This truth, in which is good, is here the celestial of the spiritual, which is represented by Joseph. It is known in the Church that Joseph, in the spiritual sense, is the Lord, and therefore the Lord is called the heavenly Joseph. But it is not known what in the Lord Joseph represents. For the Lord is represented by Abraham, and also by Isaac, as well as by Jacob, And he is also represented by Moses and Elijah, by Aaron, by David, besides many others in the Word, and yet not in the same way by one as by another. By Abraham the Lord is represented as to the divine itself, by Isaac as to the divine rational, by Jacob as to the divine natural, by Moses as to the law or historic word, by Elijah as to the prophetic word, by Aaron as to the priesthood, and by David as to the royalty. But what is represented by Joseph may be seen above. What Joseph represents is called the celestial of the spiritual from the rational, the only words by which it can be expressed. For the celestial is good from the divine, and the spiritual is truth from that good, and thus is the truth of the good from his divine human. This the Lord was when he lived in the world, but when he glorified himself, he passed above it, and became the divine good itself, or Jehovah, even as to the human. No more can be said in detail about this mystery, except that Joseph came to Egypt and first served in the house of Potiphar, the captain of the guards, and then was kept in custody, but afterwards became ruler over Egypt, in order that he might represent how the Lord gradually made the human in himself divine, about which the word was to be written, that it might contain divine things in the internal sense. This sense was to be of service more especially to the angels, whose wisdom, which is incomprehensible and ineffable in comparison with human wisdom, consists in such things, and at the same time to men, who are especially fond of narratives and reflect about them, while the angels, by influx from the Lord, perceive in them what is divine. Number 5308. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph. This signifies the perception of the natural from the celestial of the spiritual, as is evident from the signification of saying in the historic parts of the word, namely perception, and from the representation of Pharaoh, namely the natural, and from the representation of Joseph, namely the celestial of the spiritual, as often shown above. Number 5309. Forasmuch as God hath caused thee to know all this. This signifies because it has foresight and providence, as is evident from the signification of knowing when predicated of God, namely foresight and providence. For it cannot be said of God that he acquires knowledge of a thing, because he knows all things from himself, and the faculty of acquiring knowledge is in man from him. Therefore in God to know is to foresee and to provide. To foresee is to know from eternity to eternity, and to provide is to act accordingly. The reason why the celestial of the spiritual has foresight and providence is that in the internal sense the subject here is the Lord, who is the celestial of the spiritual, represented by Joseph. Number 5310. There is no one so intelligent and wise as thou. This signifies that this is the only source of truth and good, as is evident from the signification of intelligent, namely true, and from the signification of wise, namely good. That truth and good are from no other source than this is signified by no one, because in the internal sense no one or none is negative, thus is exclusive of every other. Number 5311. Thou shalt be over my house. This signifies that the natural mind shall be subordinate and submissive thereto, as is evident from the signification of a house, namely the mind, here the natural mind, because it is called my house by Pharaoh, who represents the natural. That it shall be subordinate and submissive is signified by thou shalt be over it. For he that is over anyone's house really rules it, and has all who are in it subordinate and submissive to him, though in appearance the master of the house still retains the name and dignity. Number 5312. And thy mouth shall all my people kiss. This signifies that everything therein shall be in obedience to him, as is evident from the signification of kissing the mouth, namely, acknowledging and doing what is bidden, thus obeying, and from the signification of all my people, namely, everything in the natural. By people are signified truths, thus the knowledges of good and truth in the natural, and also external knowledges, for these are the truths of the natural.